Hello and welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly program where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. The standard disclaimer applies. The thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely the opinions of the participants and do not represent any Grand Lodge statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversations open for the public and on the level. To interact with us, send questions and comments to the Facebook event page for episode 251, Is Freemasonry Relevant? ? Or on the chat running alongside this YouTube video. Hello and good evening and welcome to all of those watching live. It continues to grow every week and we enjoy the dialogue that we have. So welcome and good evening. My name is John Ruark. I'm a past master of the Patriot Lodge, number 1957 in Fairfax, Virginia. Next up for introductions, we have Juan Sepulveda. Good evening, Juan.
Hello, good evening, John. Juan Sepulveda here from Orange Blossom Lodge, number 80 in Kissimmee, Florida, the host of the Winding Stairs Freemasonry podcast.
Excellent. Next up, we have the Jason Richards. Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello. Jason Richards, past master of Acacia Lodge, number 16 in Clifton, Virginia, member of the Colonial Lodge, number 1821 in Washington, D.C.
There's nothing wrong with a pregnant pause. It's kind of like the old joke about the bear that says, I'd like to have a dry martini. And the bartender says, why the big pause?
I was born with them.
That's right. For all of you joining us again, we want to send an extra thank you to our patrons. If you wish to support the show, please head over to patreon.com/the Masonic Roundtable, where you can get access to a private Facebook group, see some behind the scenes videos, some live videos, and interact with us offline all through the week. So
and get a snazzy
look at that
TMR patron only lapel pin, which is the best lapel pin I've ever made.
But humble brag, right?
Humble brag, yeah.
But it is
hashtag in my humble opinion. Yeah.
IMHO.
Yep.
Awesome. And Mike is in and out tonight. He's switching between his mobile Masonic command and his domicile. So he'll be joining us in a minute. But
SAT word.
Domicile. I wanted to also, before we get into this week's topic, did any of my Scottish Rite brethren get one of these, the Scottish Rite Journal for the Southern Masonic jurisdiction?
Nope.
Well, good, because it's online as well. Which we'll send a link to. However, in the back, there is an overview of not just book reviews, but podcast reviews. The podcast explosion has occurred. And you'll see right there on the right-hand page a little snippet about your favorite Masonic podcast.
Kaboom.
Not talking about the Winding Stairs.
Talking
about one of these handsome gentlemen in the middle. That is the Masonic Roundtable. So if you want to read the whole, albeit brief, review, go check that out. We will also have links somewhere in the YouTube chat, on the Facebook event page. Don't worry, you'll find it. Or just go Google Scottish Rite Journal for the
podcast explosion.
Right. It's exploded all over. For March, April 2019. The Scottish Rite Journal. Check that out. And that vamped long enough to have our fourth host for this evening, Mike
Grizzly Adams.
How you doing, Mike?
Good. How are you?
Mike
Hambrick here, Triandria Lodge, number 780 out of Rock Creek, junior deacon and lodge education officer.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us just in time with that fancy York Rite tie that you have.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the one I actually have to wear.
There's a story behind that, I can assume.
Oh, yeah.
So this week, we are going to talk about, is Freemasonry relevant? Now, it's not just a generic, is it relevant? Because we will all have a biased opinion, I assume. But we want to look at it through the lens of the 21st century and modern society, right? There's been a lot of changes in the last 2 decades, especially in American society. There's been a lot of polarization. There's been a lot of dialogue. There's been a lot of changing priorities. And for a 300-plus-year-old fraternity, we have to ask ourselves, is there still an institutional place for such fraternity? And if so, what value does it offer? Or what does it supplement current society's rules, or what does it add to or subtract from, or where does it create something completely and wholly separate? So tonight we're going to all chime in with our opinions only. Remember, these are just our opinions on whether Freemasonry is or isn't relevant to today's culture, people, and society. So in no particular order, I'm just going to go ahead and say, Mr. Juan Sepulveda, what do you think about Freemasonry's relevance, especially in the 21st century?
Well, I think the whole premise of the show is interesting. Like you said, we're going to have a positive inclination towards saying that it is relevant. But if we can look at it from an objective point of view, Freemasonry is established as a set of morality. It's a system of morality. It just by that definition of it being a system of morality, if you were to look at how our society today is behaving, and the trends that you see when it comes to people pertaining to particular religions or denominations, how activated they are in set organizations, and you see that there is a level of change where there is not necessarily one dominant religion or three dominant religions. You have multiple religions throughout the world. Some of them are growing very rapidly, others are diminishing, but the majority of them and the involvement in them seems to be waning, at the least in the United States. So having a system of morality that is to a degree secular, that doesn't necessarily prescribe to a specific religion, I think is relevant in today's society. If a man were to be found worthy and well qualified and join the ranks of Masonry, if he is fortunate enough that the lodge that he joins puts value in instructing him in an adequate way, I think Freemasonry can be incredibly relevant to that individual because it can put in his hands a set of tools and philosophies that can help him in a practical way to grow as a man and a member of society.
I think one thing to add to that I've been mulling over is, especially when you consider the 7 liberal arts and sciences, both the trivium and the quadrivium, and how they are taught. While they are taught at the surface level in the degrees that we go through, I think those are things that we should always have as constant reminders. More especially in 2019, the trivium, where we have grammar, rhetoric, and logic, knowing how to form cogent arguments, how to debate properly without defaulting to logical fallacies and cognitive biases, right? Being able to just truly understand what it means to have a conversation, have a debate without having an argument. And for those who are on social media in a polarized environment like we have today, it's very hard to see that kind of dialogue between people who have completely different philosophical ideas. And so while Robert, poked the iron in the fire this past week with a blog post entitled "Why We Should Discuss Religion and Politics and Lodge," because no one could argue with that, right? He brought up a good point that we need to have the skills afforded to us, that we should be able to have these conversations without relying on our human passions and actually elevate ourselves above that. What say you, Jason? Do you agree, disagree? As you look for your mute button.
Sorry about that. I would tend to agree that Masonry offers a moral grounding in a way that most fraternal organizations don't. It's just I don't have much else to say outside of, yes, from the moral standpoint, I love Masonry as a system of morality where I can get some semblance of moral grounding from a good citizenship perspective outside of the moral grounding that I would find in my church. For me, one of the things that I think where Masonry really adds value and provides relevancy today is just the sheer scope of knowledge and tradition and custom and learning. I talk a lot to folks when I go and speak places, because folks don't understand how we could have 251 episodes of a podcast devoted to an entirely different topic on the part of Freemasonry that isn't a secret. How is there so much to talk about? And it's just because of the fact that Masonry has such a rich history, a rich culture, and it's steeped in such rich philosophical and spiritual ideas that you can vamp on things directly and or tangentially related to Masonry for years and years and years, and show no sign of stopping. So if you just dig into the underpinnings of the Masonic tenets and the Masonic fraternity, you could fill up several lifetimes of study just about human beings and how they think and act and what they do.
Now, I want to pull a thread on one thing you did say about, Freemasonry provides a system of morality that you can contemplate on, unlike or in addition to your church. And so, having if there were no religious system of morality in place, is there any other system of morality that would fill that void other than Freemasonry?
So,
morality standpoint.
So from a morality standpoint, you could argue that, if there were no system, if there were no spiritual system of morality in place, and we can get into moral relativism versus relativism, excuse me, English is hard, moral absolutism, but that's the topics for another show. If there is no spiritually based system of morality in place, I think, frankly, a lot of that defaults to the state. So you would have ostensibly state imposed morality in the form of legislation and laws.
And laws. Yeah, I was thinking like state sponsored higher education or something like that.
Yeah, but I mean, I even think of it as, murder's a crime, don't do it. Stealing's a crime, don't do it. That sort of.
It's good to be taught that.
Yeah, you think of going back to Hammurabi's code, being one of the earliest extant records of a set of rules and guidelines from the state handed down to the people. But Freemasonry offers kind of almost an apolitical, a-religious set of values, which I think is cool.
Juan?
Yeah, I wanted to expound on the whole system of morality. Of course, history and tradition informs us that most moral that the moral compass of an individual comes from a revelation. So it comes from a higher being communicating to us humans, and we document the intent of that deity and establish a moral code. Now, of course, this is a very interesting conversation that I would love to really engage in on a personal level, because there's a personal component there that is worthy of exploring. But I like to think of some of the modern concepts that I've been exposed to. When you think of, for example, I'm sure some people might not like him as an author or as a philosopher, but Sam Harris is someone that I follow very closely, and he came out with a book called The Moral Landscape, in which he posits that without revelation, without the necessity of having a specific religion to guide our morality, mankind should be able to come up with reasonable, emphasis on reasonable, reasonable guidelines to establish morality for mankind. And these would be based on not the authority of a book or a sacred law, but our understanding that as humans, our goal is to support or promote the well-being of humans. Okay, of course, that's going to require a definition of what well-being means, but the goal is for us to promote the highest amount of benefit and well-being for humans, and to avoid as much as possible of the suffering that humanity is engaged in. So under that particular light, you should be able to look at different situations in life and come up with a reasonable way of saying, like, is this something that contributes to the well-being of humanity or the well-being of this individual and society as a whole, or is this detrimental to progress, detrimental to the individual or society? Anyway, so a lot of people will say that it is impossible to, without religion, to have morality. I personally don't think that's the case, and these are the conversations that I love to have person to person with people.
All right. Hammy, what do you think about Masonry's relevance in today's society?
Well, to be honest, I don't think that at this point we're as relevant as we have been. Why
is that?
Because I think that Masonry itself has lost sight of what it used to be. And what I mean by that is lodges used to have guys sitting around having discussions on many topics, and whether they lit it in the lodge or in the refreshment area, they actually had real philosophical debates. They had, you look at our founding fathers. I don't want to bring up the whole conspiracy possibility there, but the idea, because I don't believe in that, but the point is, these guys, Sam Adams was a Mason, and he was one of the Sons of Liberty, at the Green Dragon Tavern Lodge, which was at St. John's, I think. But anyway, while there, they obviously talked about this because there's a great many of the Masons that were there that were also Sons of Liberty. Did George Washington discuss some of this in one of his lodges? And we know that Ben Franklin uses lodges to actually help get the French into this. He didn't use it that way, but discussions were had because of, but whether they were political or philosophical is debatable. Because, philosophically, you can have discussions on tyranny without saying that it's political, but it still is. And today, do we have those discussions in lodge? Very rarely, because politics and religion aren't allowed. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we start sitting down and having Republican and Democratic and libertarian debates, because believe me, I know where that's going to go. But if we have debates over topics that are dealt with on the political scope, but not necessarily politically divisive, we may actually be able to start walking out of our lodge, having a guy who, decides, what, I'm going to help the community with this. I'm going to help our community decide to fix the roads. I'm going to help our communities to fix our schools. That's a conversation we can easily have in lodge. Because we just try and discuss education. And if you even look at, as you said, the trivium and the quadrivium right there, how is it we can know what that is, the 7 liberal arts and sciences, and yet when I was a kid, even asking, what is the 7 liberal arts and sciences? Too many adults were like, well, it's this, this, and this, but not why you need those. As a kid, why do I have to go to school? I get that. But no, it's not just that. It's why do I need to know grammar? Why do I need to know rhetoric and logic? And we're not even being taught it that way. But that's what we're being taught. We're being taught how to communicate. and yet we've actually stepped back and not done that as well as we should. We also are not teaching mathematics and geometry and all of that as well as we should. Those are the kinds of things we could discuss in a lodge, and we could even start. I mean, there's one topic that is on a political fringe, but civics. We could be discussing how to do civics, which is really how your government runs.
Right.
And that's not political. It is, but
It's
it
about
isn't.
politics, but it's not political.
Right.
It's like our institution is not a religion, but it's religious.
Right.
I hate that phrase.
Go on.
But I did want to say this perfectly dovetails into an article written by the host of the Masonic Roundtable, who's not here right now.
Right.
Robert Johnson. Love you, buddy. So Robert actually did a guest post on the Millennial Freemason on Sunday on the problem with banning politics and religion. So I will drop that in the show notes for anyone who wants to go and read it. And it reemphasizes the point that Mike just made about how so often we just, scream to the heavens as Masons, there's, no politics and religion in lodge. And a lot of folks, frankly, just use it as an excuse not to think and not to challenge their own assumptions. And so if you listen to this week's Whence Came You podcast, Robert also read it on his podcast. So go and check it out. I'll drop the links in the show notes.
Now, the next question I have for you guys is something to think about. Is okay. Take morality and a institution of learning and thinking and critical analysis aside. Push that off to the side. What about purely as a social institution, right? From a fraternity aspect, where we have the Moose, the Elks, the Rotary, and Freemasonry. All of those. As a social institution, is it still relevant in today's society where we have communities that are built online, friendships online, that people you'll never meet, but you can have a close and intimate contact with, and where we're so caught up in the minutia of day-to-day activities, and then there are other things to fill our time, especially as younger people are becoming more and more social with their own specific causes. Does Freemasonry provide a social container for the 21st century? And so to lead the witness, I would say probably yes, in the fact that it does offer an asylum, a way away from the world and the way it spins. It does create to use an overloaded term, a safe space where men of different cultures, right? We talk about how brothers that may have been otherwise at a perpetual distance, now we can kind of meet on the level in a common meeting area where we're not trying to talk about, oh, I have more degrees than you, or I have more money than you, or I have more, a bigger house than you. That's all off the table. That as a social institution, we can get away from the things that divide us and talk about the things that can unite us. And if nothing else, at the bare minimum, for the lodges that just practice pancake flipping masonry in a good way, in the most genuine, down to earth way, salt of the earth people, it could be a great institution that needs to thrive if for no other reason that is a union point of brotherly love.
I mean, I really love the way that you position that, because when you started mentioning the Elks and the Rotary, and I started thinking, well, unless there's a differentiator there, unless there's something there that really makes it special, perhaps relevant, yes, but there's nothing. There wouldn't be anything special about it. But when you position it and say, here you have everyone meeting at the level, on the level. So there is that unspoken expectation that we're all brothers. Doesn't matter how much you make a year. Doesn't matter what titles you have. Still call me Colonel. It doesn't matter. all those differentiators don't really matter. And you have that unspoken rule that says, okay, let's not talk about politics. Let's not talk about religion. Okay, go at it. What else is left? What else? And that frees up the individual to have a connection with another man. And, here you taking away all these separators, and now you're a common individual, and now you can talk about some things that are more profound. I really like that. From that point of view, I think that, Freemasonry is, it would be very relevant, considering that more and more, the majority of our connections are happening in a virtual world. So it's a world that's devoid of layers, because you don't see necessarily the expression of the individual. Maybe you don't see the gesticulation whenever they're talking. You don't get to feel, you don't get all the senses involved. But when you go to a meeting, like for example, I just recently went to a York Rite festival, and I was talking with a brother there. He must have been in his late 70s. And this is a man with whom, like, we shared very little in common, other than the fact that we're Masons and we were there on Saturday. And we realized that moment, and we were talking about it. We were saying, like, here we are having this conversation. It was a good conversation. And we were reminiscing about a lot of different things that we were fond of. And we ended up talking about that fact that that's what we're missing in today's society. Like, we don't have that human connection that we foster in the lodge. And I'm very proud of what we do for in Masonry. I love the fact that we are providing some stimulating conversation, and that we have places where people can come together and have discussions, like the Winding Stairs Freemasonry group, and we have the podcast, like the Masonic Roundtable, Whence Came You, the Winding Stairs, and the YouTube channels. These are all outlets that can get an individual that has aislado, ¿cómo se dice eso? It's isolated, who's now isolated in their own little world. But now he gets to connect with his brothers around the world and get to talk about Masonry. But that's not enough. We're a supplement to Masonry. We can't replace Masonry, I don't think. There's that human connection that
Right.
Keeps it relevant.
That's a good point. I mean, we've I don't know if we've said it publicly, but we've always said privately that, like, hey, we would like it if we were to go away, right? Because we're not trying to replace Masonry. We're trying to talk about the things we want to talk about in lodge that we just never get a chance to. So, and like this is a great topic that should, feel free, take this topic and introduce it in lodge. And I've heard about worshipful masters literally asking a simple question like, is Freemasonry relevant in today's society? Discuss, and that being an hour and a half presentation, because everyone has their own opinions from the sidelines, and everyone's the wiser when they share this common gestalt of ideas and philosophies. So even we don't want to replace, and nor can we replace the human interaction, the caring for another brother, but certainly that's part of the secret sauce. Jason, how about you? What do you think about Freemasonry as a purely social point for society?
So Freemasonry as a social construct, I think that was my original reason for joining. Why I stay is a little bit more evolved now, but I think Freemasonry as a social construct, I think it doesn't have as clear of a value proposition as the perhaps Freemasonry as an educational construct, or as a moral construct, just because Freemasonry really competes right now. with all sorts of other social organizations. So you had the Odd Fellows, who really were on Freemasonry's heels as another big social organization. Right now, you've got folks have so much that they have the ability to use their time for, and we've only got 24 hours in the day. Each of us has to figure out what to spend those 24 hours on. And we thank our listeners because you're spending some of that time listening to us jabber on. But there are so many organizations that you can be a part of. There are so many
to do while they're in their car commuting, so they have to listen to us.
Yeah, fair. I rescind my former statement of thanks.
You're not allowed to stream Netflix while you're driving.
Yes.
Not allowed
until you get a Tesla like John.
until you get caught.
Yeah, until you get caught. But you've got so many organizations. You've got so much stuff that you can do. You can be on a kickball team. You can spend time with your family. You can join the Rotary. You can be a part of an alumni group of your college fraternity. You can join a chess club. Like, there's so many things that you can do outside of Masonry that could provide you that like-minded social construct, which is why I firmly believe that the intersection of the social construct with the educational and initiatic ritualistic construct are where Masonry really remains relevant and remains of high value today, because you don't see the intersection of those things very often.
So Hammy, which is more important, Netflix and Amazon Prime Video or Freemasonry?
Oh, that's a tough one, because I just got my Amazon Prime up, so and as I admitted earlier, I've been binge watching. So
Right, that's getting to
that
the point
Jack Ryan, man.
yeah, that one too.
What it's getting to is, let's talk about the elephant in the room, that these are other social distractions that aren't going out, but are replacing, the time spent doing Masonry with binge watching. So what do you think about that?
Well, I'll admit I'm one of those guys that binge watches a lot, and there's been days when I've been getting ready for Lodge thinking, you know what, I could sit here and watch another 3 hours of this, and I wouldn't have to go tonight.
Fair.
But on the other hand, to be honest, I actually prefer to go. Because you know what, the nice thing about Netflix and Amazon Prime and Hulu and all that, for the most part, it's all there for a while. I mean, it's not like, some months the stuff disappears, but if it disappears this month, it's coming back in 6 more, and and really, again, how important is any of that stuff? It's just entertainment. Lodge, on the other hand, yeah, there's an entertainment value to it, but I'll be honest, even before I joined Masonry, I didn't do a lot. I mean, I was a member of the Sugar Valley Astronomical Society, but most of the time that was a once a month Saturday night thing, where I was with a group. Beyond that, it was solo, man. I went out to the observatories and there was nobody there, just me, middle of the night, Wednesday night, watching stars,
Kind of sounds fun.
Yeah. And it can be, but the downside to it is no, you're alone, occasionally I could call one of the other guys and they'll be like, oh yeah, I'll be right up, but then sometimes you get there and you're waiting on them and looking at stars and they just never show, because they had something else, Netflix came on, but in any case, where I'm going with that is once I joined Masonry, though, I have actually made more friends and made more connections to other people, not just men, because there's their wives in some cases, and it's just these human connections that I wasn't making before. And now, now I am actually a better person than I was. I'm not as solitary. I'm not as, I'm not as interested in just hiding in my house and staying on Netflix or, playing on my Xbox all night. I mean, I'll be honest, I don't think I've played more than 6 hours of Xbox in the last year, but I love the games, it's just, I haven't done it,
Instead of spending $60 for a new game, that's a body you could be joining. So
That's right. Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And I'm sure there's another one out there,
Achievement unlocked. All right.
Yeah. New level. Yay. But no, really, I mean, that's just how it is. And I mean, and like the one lodge I'm going to, we meet for the lodge. We have a good time. We talk in the refreshment area. And then, about half an hour after that, we actually walk out the front door, walk up the street about 5-6 doors down, and we're at Duffy's Tavern, having adult beverages and chit chat and more, and a little more in depth philosophically, But yeah, of course, the more we drink adult beverages, the more philosophical it gets.
That's funny.
Yeah.
You bring up a good point about, we've talked about before about Freemasonry kind of being the original social network, right? Making connections, and not just immediate connections, point to point, but friends of friends, or second or tertiary level outer ring connections. Again, because it's not only your brothers that you meet, but their wives, their family, their friends, if you run into them, outside the lodge. And so that certainly serves a purpose for networking beyond the Facebooks and the Instagrams and all that, of how you can make social connections, right? And let's call it for what it is. No one should be using Freemasonry to advance their social network, to make business deals and all that, but it is a nice side benefit that comes with that. You because you trust these people, you're more apt to do business with them. You're more apt to get help when you need it, because there's going to be someone with some skills in lodge that you don't have, and you may rely on them. So that is another benefit to that. Also, as far as a social institution, another thought I had too was, just even 100 years ago, that Freemasonry still acted almost as a guild system, in the sense of there were fraternal aids. So that way, because there was no health insurance, that we helped our brothers out. We helped offset funeral costs. We helped offset anytime one of ours was that needed relief. We're taught to provide relief for our brothers. So a lot of those local social relief efforts have now been replaced by the state, right? With Social Security, with and I'm not getting into politics. I'm just saying that's what it is.
Oh yeah,
that used to be taken care of locally through fraternal organizations have now been completely subjugated. That have been completely replaced. And so, actually, full disclosure, there's one group that I'm in, just within the local districts in the Northern Virginia area. It's called the Masonic Funeral Relief Fund. And what it is, everyone chips in a little bit, and it's an upside down Ponzi scheme that only gets paid off when you die, because as people die off,
it's a reverse tontine.
There you go.
Yep.
See, I knew Jason would know. And I love it, because I've been given to that I hope that it doesn't provide a lot, but it helps at least cover $1,000 or $2,000 every time a brother dies. So that helps offset some of the funeral costs, and just it's one less thing that a widow should worry about. And that's purely what we're here to do as a fraternity. I literally got the notice of my dues for that. It's like $30 a year. It's not a big deal, because it all aggregates up. But they said, we're actually wondering if this is even worth doing anymore, because of exactly the things I described, because a lot of these things are covered by insurance and covered by other areas that we really don't see a need for a fraternal substitution for these things.
Yeah, but I'll be honest. I mean, it having these things, I think, still is a relevancy, and that we need them. But the other side to it is, I think we need to actually find ways to enact them more. I mean, I'm not saying give, just walk up to the widow and say, here's $5,000 to help with the, funeral costs, or $1,000, whatever it is, whatever the dollar amount is, because they're probably getting it covered. But on the other hand, if we gave them that money, or, even though it's supposed to offset that cost, it offsets other costs though in their lives at that moment. I mean, we could, most people, when someone passes on in their lives, neighbors and whatnot bring food and so forth by, because the people are so worried about taking care of the loss that they, forget to, some aspects, eat or even prepare their own foods. And this is something that comes along and helps with that, and maybe that's what this money, and I mean, and as a brotherhood, I think we should be doing a little bit more of that, or even, even the simple phone calls, to a widow when it first happens, saying, I'm sorry to hear this. What can we do? What can we do to help you? Do you need some assistance with anything? Because for all we know, the widow has no idea what to even say or ask for at a funeral home. I mean, granted, the funeral home works with them, but the fact is they may not even have any clue of what to do, what steps they need to take, or even, what do I have to look for my husband? What do I need? What do I need first, to give to the Social Security office and so forth. Now, again, like the funeral home I went to when my mom and dad both passed, I know what they did. And that guy did know. He gave and he offered plenty of death certificate copies to make sure in advance. It's part of the service. But on the other hand, if we were talking to some of these widows, or actually even more at the loss of a child, or if someone's the sick and distressed of our brethren, what else should we be doing more often than we are? I'm sure there's some things.
Yeah, and it's good that you mentioned, that program, John, and I see the support that you threw behind it. I mean, especially because you had such a recent situation in which it would have been, it would have made a big difference to you and to the family around you. But another thing, when it comes to relevance, it's also not take all these things as given, because this is, our lodge does this, our district has been doing this for these many years. In the effort of staying relevant, we have to take all these things that we do, all these, traditions that we have, and in the light of today's membership and today's brothers, see if those individual things are still relevant. Because we might be putting right now, let's say your lodge is, it's short manned. It doesn't have a lot of people there. And all of them are doing an extra effort to make sure that they put on degrees of quality, that they're going to the meetings and they're doing all these great things. And if there are additional programs that we just do them because we have been doing them, and I'm not saying I'm not saying the funeral one specific, but, other ones. If we intend to be relevant, we have to look at how society is changing, how our membership is changing, and see if some of these things are even worth continuing to do, or if our energies are better spent in other areas. I want to take it aside and say thank you to Simba on Fire, Brother McGeehee, for his super chat. I don't know if you guys noticed it. For those that are on the chat area now, you saw his name pop up to the top. He donated some money to a program, which definitely is going to go to, help us in our efforts. So we greatly appreciate that. And if you've have the $500 just laying around you want to throw our way, there's a $sign at the bottom of the chat window. And that's how he got to do that. And for those listening, get a chance to check out Simba on Fire. You can click on his name there and check out his channel. He has some really cool episodes there.
And of course, he has priorities. He's a firefighter by trade, but had to stop saving children out of a burning fire so he could watch the live TMR. So he didn't miss any of this interaction he's getting here. So
of
priorities.
Right.
Yeah, so let's stay relevant, guys. Yeah, it's up to us, like in all honesty. I was looking forward to having this conversation because our fraternity is steeped in great traditions, some of which they need no tweaking. We don't have to stop them just because we've been doing them for a long time. But there are other things that we might be doing, or a particular lodge may be doing, that would make it irrelevant in their community or in their society. We talked about the aspect of um, the social aspect. We talked about the initial conversation of its relevance when it came to morality. But if you don't mind, I wanted to mention the charity component. There is a charitable component that is not just limited to donating money to organizations, but donating time, attention, um, shining a light on different things. And Freemasonry, you know, our charitable donations are significant when it comes to the way that we contribute to different organizations. But if it were just for the charity component alone, would Freemasonry be relevant in today's environment? And because it made me think of like how efficient can we be as Masons in raising money and putting it in the hands of the people that need it. I don't think that's our I don't think that's our skill set. I don't think that's what we do.
That is true. We could have a whole conversation, maybe another episode about what's the lodge's responsibility as far as finances go, right? I know I've had lots of conversations with some local Prince Hall brethren of that sometimes they actually have to have financial certifications before they start handling lodge monies and charity monies. And so unlike at least in our jurisdiction, that's not required. And so you're giving a lot of money in the hands of people who may not be qualified to handle this kind of interaction. And so just something to think about there. Given the time, there's two things I want to do. One, to give a shout out to Art Monk for also throwing us a little bit on the super chat. So good evening, Art. And also ask one final question to the rest of you, which is, if we've all kind of assumed with our natural bias that Freemasonry is relevant still in the 21st century, now the next question is, what would make it more relevant, in your opinion, for today's society? Starting with Mr. Richards.
Wow. Okay. What would make it more relevant? I could go with the easy answer, which would be more education. But again, I feel like that's a bit of a cop out. I would say Freemasonry could become more relevant if Freemasons across the world and across the community exercised more openness to other ideas, or to ideas outside of their own particular worldviews. We get mired in our own way of thinking, and Freemason really is about making men better and helping us learn from each other. At some point, we have to set our own perspectives aside for something new, and I think the non-sectarian ecumenical aspect of Freemasonry is a huge value proposition. Today, I mentioned that in the YouTube chat a little bit. We're seeing we're seeing across the board a decline in church going, and a decline of affection and affinity to organized religion. But at the same time, we're seeing an increase in personal spirituality.
Yep.
And so millennials are joining Freemasonry, whereas the Gen Xers and the baby boomers hadn't been. I say hadn't been because the boomers are now joining too. But I think a way to retain that relevancy, especially for those folks who are perhaps disillusioned with, or simply not interested in organized religion, I think a way to further promote relevancy to to those deeply personalized views of faith is to be more open-minded and less stringent about what your worldview has to be, what your morality has to be, what your faith tradition has to be.
Mm-hmm. Right. So less groupthink, more open-mindedness.
Yes.
Good stuff. All right.
Until open-mindedness becomes its own groupthink.
And then more groupthink. No less.
Yes.
Okay.
Wait.
What? Mike the intern. What could make Freemasonry more relevant today?
Well, what I think could make it more relevant is if we spend a little more time coming up with the way of teaching. We make good men better, of course, but I mean to actually make them better and make it so that as they get better, they go out into society and by example change society, not just, and I'm not saying, we're about changing society. It's just that because of the very impact that we have on those around us, that we will do that. And, by, examples, I mean, who knows what that would be? I mean, running for political office is one way. Another way is just going out and helping out at the local food kitchen and getting, possibly getting people to come and help you with that, it's just a matter of, that I think we need to literally get the idea across to the brothers that it isn't our organization itself that needs to be charitable. It's us. It's us going out. It's us. Everything we learn is not about doing that to the lodge. It's about doing that to each of us and returning that to the communities where we're at. And I think we need to teach that more.
I like that a lot. It's very good. Practice what we preach, right?
Mm-hmm.
One thing I'd like to add to that too is it's kind of a cop-out answer, but if we believe that it's already relevant, the way to make something more relevant would be more awareness. So it's not to change anything that we're doing, but to be more visible in the community, right?
But we don't recruit.
Oh, we don't recruit, except when we do everything we can, but say, you should join Masonry, except if you're in Pennsylvania where that's allowed.
Yeah, like replace yourself campaign, right?
Yes. To technically replace yourself.
Replace yourself campaign was Ohio.
I know.
Ooh, touchy subject. By the way, replace yourself ×3 because you're going to die, and then you need to make up for the other brother that's dying. So, and the
2.5 that are going NPD, etc.
So other than that, bring 2 friends and replace them. But yeah, more visibility, right? More awareness. The way I liken it to is, traditionally before the internet blew up and social media blew up, that Freemasonry was a staple in the community, and they would open doors, they'd hold parades, they'd be visible, they'd be always out there, and people knew who the Masons were. We've got lots of data points that show that our awareness of what we do is dwindling and diminishing in society. And so as a way to counteract that, I've been arguing this for a while, that you need to go where the community is. And if the community is not necessarily hyper local like it is today, obviously there's always exceptions to the rule, but in general, where do people go for social interaction? They go to social media, right? And there should be more of a social media presence. I'm not going to say that we should not be on there. We should not be showing ourselves what we are, who we are, what we do, and why we do it. And it's hard because every Grand Lodge is different, right? There is no Grand Lodge that speaks for the universality of Freemasonry. And yet, that should not be an excuse. That should not be an excuse to not say, if you are a Mason in Kansas, here's who we are. We are here. Here are the types of things we stand up for. Here's what you can get out of the fraternity. And by the way, here are lots of little things that you may like to kind of pique curiosity. So awareness and visibility can help become more relevant when we have all these other attention-grabbing notifications on our phone, competing binge-watching services, and so forth. So we need to be at that level and make sure that what value we're offering is at least aware of and hopefully equivalent to. Juan, how about you? What do you think about how do we make Freemasonry more relevant?
I would say that we can help the individual improve, and that improvement will improve society. So the way that I feel we can be, that we can increase our relevance, because you can think of it as a gradient. You know, I don't think you can be, it's not a either you're relevant or you're not. You could be somewhat relevant, or and improve upon that relevancy. I believe, because you could be relevant in an aspect or just an area of the individual, but you can improve upon that a little bit more. Okay, I just got a cat sneak in here. So, and how do we do that? Is like focusing on really making sure that we fulfill that promise, that we take good men and we make them better. I say that I love the Masonic degrees, and I love the impact that they can have on an individual. But it would be unfair to expect an individual to witness a degree and for him to change his life forever and just automatically be the best version of himself. That's not attainable. One thing I'm going to be talking about tomorrow in my visit to, not tomorrow, on Saturday, I'm going to Adonai Lodge in Highland, New York, and I'm going to be talking about steadfast progression. And it's about that small increments that you make in your life to become better, that awareness of where you are and where you want to be, or where you should be, and the practical steps to get there. So, in a phrase, applied Freemasonry is the way. It's for you to take Masonry and put it into real life scenarios, and how can it help you really become a better listener, a better friend, a more loyal, husband, a more attentive individual. Like, this happens by being intentional about making Freemasonry a part of your lifestyle.
So I'm hearing more pancakes.
That's right.
More Masonry equals more pancakes.
Gluten-free.
Gluten-free, all natural, locally sourced. Got it. Okay. Great show. So I think now's a good time to wrap things up for final thoughts. So let's just get right to it. Mike, the intern, is Freemasonry relevant? Go.
Yes, it is. I really think that Freemasonry is relevant today. I know that, some of what I've said is, been geared towards a little bit more like how it's not, but I still think it is. I think that it's relevant in how it helps individuals. I think it's great in how it helps us as a group as well. And, speaking of helping out in groups for that, there's Camp Masonry coming up in August. 9th, 10th, and 11th. It's going to have some really great brothers there speaking. RJ Robert Johnson for sure. Jason Richards is on the agenda as a possibility at the moment. Once the committee decides and says yes, that's where that'll go. And I will be there, and we're trying to get a few other vendors there. But anyway, that's next on the big agenda. So
nice, excellent. Thanks, Mike. Juan Sepulveda, is Freemasonry relevant?
I think so. I think Freemasonry is relevant, especially if you as an individual find the components of it that are relevant to your life and you put them to work. So it's homework. It's not something that you just get. So I encourage brothers to do that, to find the aspects of their life that need improvement, the areas that could be better, and see which tools of the craft can help you achieve that. And it is doable. You have your brothers here. You have access to millions upon millions of brothers around the world. And like I said earlier this week, in an age of information, ignorance is a choice. So if you want to know how to do it, there are brothers out there that can help you. You just need to reach out. So with that in mind, in April, I have another iteration of Applied Freemasonry, which is precisely that, is a program designed for Master Masons to actually put to work the tools of the craft. And I help you through instructional videos, audio, documents, things that can help you like really put the 24-inch gauge to work in real life. How does that even look today? Is it even relevant? So to get more information, go to thewindingstairs.com, and I'll see you in April. Good evening.
Thank you. Thank you. Jason Richards, is Freemasonry relevant? Yes or no?
Absolutely, but you have to look for it. Freemasonry is relevant, sure, where in areas where education and open-mindedness are allowed to thrive. And unfortunately, with this fraternity, those places aren't everywhere. So sometimes you have to seek out the relevancy of Freemasonry because it might not be readily available in your own lodge or in your grand jurisdiction. But that's in part what the Masonic Roundtable and other Masonic educational programs are here to do, is help maintain that relevancy for Freemasonry in general.
Okay, then. John Ruark, is Freemasonry relevant? No, not if you're looking for echo chambers, confirmation bias, closing minds, closing ideas. It's not relevant at all. But if you wish to break free of some of the trends of society today, and if you're not a Mason, hopefully you've got some of the flavor of what we're offering up. It certainly is relevant as a way to be an asylum from those things and to provide both a moral and social organization where you can feel safe and express yourself and be with people of like good mind, to help yourself become a better man. And that's the tagline, right? We take good men and make them better. And hopefully it's through that practical application of applied Freemasonry that makes us better a little bit every day. So this has been a great episode. I want to thank everyone for watching. Thanks for all of the patrons. Thanks for the YouTube chats. If you like, please go ahead and like, subscribe, ring the bell, and for our super chats. That was amazing tonight. We had 2. So thank you very much for supporting the show. We'll see you next week for a really good episode on the ornaments of the high priest's aprons. So go check that out next week. Same time, same channel. Thank you very much for watching, and keep searching for more light. Have a good night.